What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to celebrate the 75th anniversary of one of my all-time favorite movies, In a Lonely Place, directed by the legendary Nicholas Ray and starring Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham. And while the movie technically didn't come out until August of 1950, it had its New York premiere on May 17th, 1950, so we're going to talk about it now. And because I'm hoping to convince people to watch it for the first time, I'll start with spoiler-free comments, and then I'll include a verbal warning, as well as a time code below for when I go into greater detail and specificity. But I've been known to argue too passionately to convince people to see In a Lonely Place, which kind of backfired one time because my old high school roommate, he and his wife used to reach out to me all the time about movie recommendations, and they'd watch them on cable or DVD or whatever. But then flash forward a few years. After I'd already told them to see In a Lonely Place, we went to see it at the Film Forum here in New York. And about 30 seconds into the movie, during that incredible opening title sequence with Bogey just driving, where you can see his eyes in the rearview mirror, she leans over and she's like, "You already made us watch this before." I was like, "I'm sorry, well, enjoy it for a second time," because I've watched this movie many times. The first time I saw it was in the late 90s at a Humphrey Bogart Revival Festival in Los Angeles. Back in the late 90s, the Lamley Sunset 5 and the Lamley Monica 4. They would show Humphrey Bogart movies and old westerns every Saturday and Sunday morning, and I was trying to see as many of them as I possibly could. So I fell in love with it then I watched it at home several times, but I've seen it twice at the Film Forum since then, and I'm now a proud owner of the Criterion Blu-ray, lovingly restored. It looks beautiful, and it's got some great special features on there. In any case, here's the pitch for In a Lonely Place.
Did you see Mr. Steele last night?
Yes, as I came home, I saw him going to his apartment with a girl.
That girl was murdered between 1 and 2 o'clock this morning.
The simplest way I can describe In a Lonely Place is that it's a film noir about the movie business. And usually when people hear film noir, the first thing they think of is The Maltese Falcon and The Big Sleep, and basically Humphrey Bogart talking tough, pushing people around, interacting with just drop-dead gorgeous women who turned out to be femme fatales, and all the trappings of like hard-boiled fiction. But for me, film noir can be that, and I love it when it's that, but it's also more of a mood, it's a style, and it was very pervasive in the late 40s where you had that post-World War II cynicism that started working its way into some movies. And In a Lonely Place has this feeling of tragedy kind of looming over the whole movie, where no matter what the intentions of the characters might be, whatever their goals might be, and professionally, romantically, spiritually, artistically, whatever the case might be, sometimes in film noir, fate is always sticking out its foot to trip you up, and then sometimes in film noir, you're a victim of your own demons. And I feel like this is one of those movies that falls into the latter category. And on the Blu-ray, there's a great little documentary where director Curtis Hanson walks people through why he loves In a Lonely Place so much. And Curtis Hanson, he directed LA Confidential. He knew a thing or two about film noir, but in the little featurette In a Lonely Place Revisited from 2002, Curtis Hanson describes very eloquently how the title works on multiple levels. The first level refers to wrestling with your own demons. And you can be in a very lonely place when you're wrestling with your demons. And Humphrey Bogart's character, Dixon Steele, has quite a few demons. He's a stick of dynamite that's always threatening to go off.
Dick! Stop it! Stop it! Let him alone!
Everybody in his life loves him. Everybody's rooting for him. Everybody wants to be around him. But he's a hothead, and he's prone to violence. And so that's a big problem. But the title can also refer to the lonely place that an artist lives in, because Dixon Steele's a screenwriter, but he hasn't really been at the top of his game since before World War II. He's a veteran of World War II. He recently wrote, in the context of the movie, he recently wrote a movie which was a flop, and it stunk, and everybody hated it.
Well, are you in any position to be choosy? You haven't written a hit since before the war, and your last picture, so it stunk.
And he's trying to bounce back, and he's considering taking on a job of adapting a book that is, it's pure trash, but people love it, people adore it, and they're considering hiring him to do the screenplay adaptation. And he's in a very lonely place trying to figure out to what degree he should stick to his artistic integrity, or should he just embrace it and become a popcorn salesman, like he describes the director who's attached to the movie.
You know what you are? You're a popcorn salesman. That's right, so are you.
But the final place that the title describes, In a Lonely Place, is the lonely place where people can live when they're living without love. And Dixon Steele has been looking for love for a long time, but he hasn't really known what he's looking for.
I've been looking for someone for a long time. I didn't know her name or where she lived. Never seen her before. And a girl was killed, and because of that, I found what I was looking for.
And he's definitely had relationships. I mean, we bump into several characters in the movie who refer to his checkered past on that front. But suddenly, Gloria Graham, her character walks into his life. And as he describes incredibly eloquently in the movie,
I was born when she kissed me. I died when she left me. I lived a few weeks while she loved me.
which is a line that gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, every time I say it. And this movie, like I was rewatching it a couple days ago, in the first 5 or 6 minutes, there are more great lines of dialogue than we see like in an entire year of Hollywood output in the 2020s. And it was, I couldn't even get through the movie without pausing it like every 5 seconds. And that's a great line I got to write down. Oh, that's a great line I got to write down. It was ridiculous. This screenplay is an absolute thing of beauty. The performances are incredible. The photography is incredible. This is Nicholas Ray, truly at the top of his game. And so maybe before I go any further describing the movie, we should just talk about who is Nicholas Ray. I will not claim to be the world's foremost expert on Nicholas Ray, but I've seen about 8 or 9 of his movies. But anytime I think about trying to learn more about Nicholas Ray, I end up just watching In a Lonely Place again. But 1,000 years ago, I did manage to read his book. I was interrupted, and as I was looking through the pages a couple days ago, it's always a little bit surreal when you look at a book where you were underlining passages in an earlier stage in your life where it's like, why did I think that was so important or so revelatory? Like that line's kind of inconsequential, but it's just so funny seeing like what I thought was so important a quarter century ago versus now. But thanks to the featurettes on the Blu-ray, I finally saw the documentary I'm a Stranger Here Myself, which is all about Nicholas Ray in the latter part of his life, but it has a ton of material in there about In a Lonely Place because for him it was an incredibly personal film. But like Dixon Steele in this movie, Nicholas Ray suffered from his fair share of demons as well. I mean, he's one of those classic chain-smoking, hard-drinking directors who had a lot of tempestuous love affairs, a lot of chaos in his life. And in his latter years, he actually even wore a fucking eye patch. And I feel like you cannot be a really balls-to-the-wall, kick-ass classic director unless you wear a goddamn eye patch. Like Raoul Walsh wore an eye patch. Fritz Lang wore an eye patch. Andre de Toth wore an eye patch. Eventually, John Ford wore an eye patch. But back in the day, these mean, surly old directors, eventually, they all wore eye patches. I have no idea what was going on, why they had to. Actually, with Raoul Walsh, I know that apparently like a jackrabbit jumped through a window and tore up his eye while he was driving. But let's not get sidetracked talking about Raoul Walsh. That'll be another topic for another day. But getting back to Nicholas Ray, he's one of those directors where he was truly haunted by demons. And this documentary captures that incredibly well. And there's a brilliant long clip, which I can't include here due to copyright reasons, where he has the following quote. And I first saw a snippet of this quote in Martin Scorsese's documentary, A Personal Journey Through American Filmmaking. But I'll do my best to recite the lines by Nicholas Ray. I need an eye patch for this, but he said, "My heroes are no more neurotic than the audience. Unless you can feel that a hero is just as fucked up as you are, that you would make the same mistakes that he would make, you can have no satisfaction when he does commit a heroic act. Because then you can say, hell, I could have done that too." And that's the obligation of the filmmaker, of the theater worker, to give a heightened sense of experience to the people who pay to come see his work. And I feel like that's one of the best lines I've ever heard describing what do filmmakers do, what do storytellers do when they're trying to persuade somebody to throw down money and come experience whatever story they have created. And I think one of the many factors that helps imbue this movie with such a potent sense of love and loss is the fact that the leading lady, Gloria Graham, was going through a pretty nasty divorce with Nicholas Ray at that time. And just to give you an idea, a little peek behind the curtain in terms of some of the factors driving that divorce, Nicholas Ray came home one day and his 13-year-old son from another marriage who had just come home from military school, he caught him in bed with Gloria Graham, and then later Gloria Graham would end up marrying Nicholas Ray's son. So that's just a brief snapshot, a brief snippet of some of the strange things going on behind the scenes with these incredibly volatile, self-destructive artists, both Nicholas Ray and Gloria Graham. And they're both fascinating people with their own fascinating biographies. And Gloria Graham has an absolutely astonishing career. I mean, movies like The Big Heat, or even smaller roles in movies like It's a Wonderful Life. But in the late 40s and early 50s, Gloria Graham was the shit. She was a true knockout who also had the acting chops that would allow her to be a great vehicle for the stories of storytellers like Nicholas Ray.
You know Dix didn't do it. You saw him after the girl left.
But Lochner has a different idea. He believes Dix could have done it. I left his office feeling as though he were trying to warn me. I came here because I wanted to say these things out loud and be laughed at. But you're not laughing.
So Nicholas Ray was basically sleeping at the production office and at the soundstage every night instead of going home. And just to give you an idea of how different things were in Hollywood back in 1950, here's a bit of Hollywood trivia for you. According to IMDb and a few other sites, this is a pretty notorious story, but producer Robert Lord was worried about having Nicholas Ray and Gloria Graham, then husband and wife whose marriage was on the rocks, working together. He made Graham sign a contract stipulating that, quote, "My husband shall be entitled to direct, control, advise, instruct, and even command my actions during the hours from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day except Sunday. I acknowledge that in every conceivable situation, his will and judgment shall be considered superior to mine and shall prevail. Graham was also forbidden to nag, cajole, tease, or in any other feminine fashion seek to distract or influence him." I mean, that's like an episode of Mad Men, like all rolled into one. That is completely, totally insane. But apparently, according to the cast and crew, both Nicholas Ray and Gloria Graham were both at the absolute top of the game on the set. They were true pros, and the fact that they were such professionals, you can see it in every single scene that unfolds in this amazing movie. And every time I do a little digging into the lives of Nicholas Ray and Gloria Graham, I just keep coming across all these crazy stories. Like Nicholas Ray was the degenerate gambler. He'd go out and blow all of his salary on silly games of chance, and then Gloria Graham would have to bail him out. I mean, they were very codependent, very dysfunctional in a variety of ways, but the artistic results cannot be denied. And Nicholas Ray, over the course of his meteoric career, he kind of rose and fell very quickly, but he managed to make a few movies of astonishing emotional intensity. And I feel like if you were to like put a gun in my head and say, like, what does Nicholas Ray do? I would just say it's emotion. He just gets at the root of a certain type of emotional intensity that I think would scare to death most of the directors. And of the movies that I've seen, once again, I've not done a comprehensive deep dive of his entire career, but They Live by Night, it's incredible. Obviously, In a Lonely Place. On Dangerous Ground, which he kind of co-directed with Ida Lupino, that's incredible as well. The Lusty Men I've seen, but I barely remember it. Johnny Guitar, big favorite for Francois Truffaut, the French New Wave. Adored Nicholas Ray. It's mostly due to Truffaut and Godard that Nicholas Ray earned this incredibly lofty reputation. Rebel Without a Cause, obviously, was a massive hit and helped make James Dean a legend for all time. Bigger Than Life might be Nicholas Ray's most overwrought movie. I've only seen it once or twice. Once again, I always come back to In a Lonely Place, but there are a lot of fans out there like Scorsese who worship Bigger Than Life. And I've also seen Bitter Victory and 55 Days of Peking. It's funny, toward the end of Nicholas Ray's career, he started doing these big, giant historical epics. I can't think of a director less well-suited to direct epics than Nicholas Ray. I feel like his late 40s, early 50s emotional period is definitely his sweet spot. But I've been rambling quite a bit at this point without actually discussing the plot. So here's the official premise from IMDb. Once again, no spoilers. A potentially violent screenwriter is a murder suspect until his lovely neighbor clears him. However, she soon starts to have her doubts. Well, let me just go ahead and contradict that from the word go, because he's not a potentially violent screenwriter. He is a violent screenwriter. He's got a very short fuse, a very bad temper, and he's getting in scraps left and right. I mean, like in the very first scene of the movie, he nearly gets in a brawl in traffic because an actress is talking to him about some movie that he wrote that she appeared in.
Well, you wrote the last picture I did in Columbia.
Well, I make it a point never to see pictures I write.
You, stop bothering my wife.
The husband gets, he gets aggressive, and Dixon Steele's like, all right, like, let's go. And Nicholas Ray, he used to brag about how he took the gun out of Bogey's hand, because if you look at some of the best movies by Humphrey Bogart in the late 30s throughout the 1940s, more often than not, not always, but more often than not, he did have a gun in his hand.
Hello, pal. Easy. Somebody's always giving me guns.
But in Casablanca, he eventually uses a gun. High Sierra, he uses a gun. To Have and Have Not, he'd rather have a fishing pole in his hand, but I think in To Have and Have Not, he eventually gets a gun in his hand. At a minimum, he's punching a lot of people. What else? Treasure of the Sierra Madre certainly has plenty of violence. But yeah, Bogey was in a lot of really violent movies. Or Key Largo. I mean, he just made so many incredible movies throughout the late 30s and throughout the 1940s. But in A Lonely Place, he's got his cigarettes, he's got his booze, his coffee, his typewriter, and that's enough. But throughout the first few scenes of the movie, it is well and thoroughly established that Dixon Steele is capable of acts of violence
There goes Dix again.
Which places the audience in a bit of an awkward position, because here we have Bogey, one of the biggest movie stars ever, who is suspected of a murder, and we're not quite sure whether or not he's guilty or innocent, because a woman's been choked and thrown from a moving car, and he's one of several suspects, not the only suspect. And Gloria Graham, his neighbor, she comes in and testifies that she saw him at a certain time, and so he's in the clear. But emotionally, throughout the entire movie, we're like, all right, this guy, like, we're rooting for him as a screenwriter. We're rooting for him to find love and happiness and, success and tranquility and the peace of mind that has always eluded him. But we don't quite know. Can we trust this guy? Is he a psycho? Because he almost seems to take perverse pleasure in proving that he might be a psycho. And when people are asking him, like, oh my God, Dix, like, did you do it? He almost kind of enjoys, like, in an insolent way, kind of teasing them and suggesting that he might be the killer. Or when he goes over to a friend's house, he's describing how the murder could have gone down, and we see Bogey with, like, quite literally fire in his eyes from the way that they've lit the scene, describing with relish and joy how the murder might have taken place. And over the course of the movie, once again, just so many acts of violence, we never quite know what to make of them. And so we're rooting for him every step of the way. But I like how we're never on firm footing. And I like how Bogey was willing to play these kinds of roles. Roles like we saw in The Caine Mutiny, or roles like we saw in Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where he was not afraid to be unlikable. I mean, he's probably one of the most insolent, petulant actors of all time, who, like, He's a guy that you kind of, you love to hate, or you kind of secretly want to be, because he's just so confident and so cool. And I just feel like this is Bogey at his most confident every step of the way. And a perfect example of that is the scene where he starts falling in love with Gloria Graham. As he's being interrogated by police, and she's been interrogated, and he's just sitting behind her, casually smoking a cigarette, just gazing at her. She talks about how she likes his face, and he has a nice face and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I'll never say any one particular movie is Humphrey Bogart's best movie, but In a Lonely Place is a strong contender for the best work of his career. But I think that's about as far as I can go without offering some spoilers. So I'll just close this section with this. I think 1950 is secretly perhaps the best year in the history of movies when it comes to dark, grim movies about showbiz. Because in this year, we have Nicholas Ray's In a Lonely Place, Hall of Fame masterpiece. Shortly thereafter, we saw the release of Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. I mean, Hall of Fame classic. I'll definitely be doing a 75th anniversary review of that. And then later in the year, All About Eve from director Joseph L. Mankiewicz, which is theater with a little bit of movies kind of sprinkled in. But goddamn, all three of those movies, like, not one of them's like, hey, here's a happy-go-lucky movie about becoming a singer or a dancer or a screenwriter, or what, like, isn't showbiz fun? All three of these movies are dark and tragic and perverse in a lot of ways. So I like how when people think of the 1950s, they usually think of, like, 1950s TV shows and kind of like Father Knows Best and that kind of thing. But there's a dark underbelly to 1950s cinema if you know where to look. And I feel like all three of those movies are absolutely essential classics. I've seen all of them many times over, and so I'll definitely be reviewing all three of this unholy trinity over the course of the year. But I think it's time to get into some details when it comes to In a Lonely Place. So last spoiler warning, 3, 2, 1, bail out now. You've been warned. All right, so now that we're in the spoiler section, I can just spoil myself rotten and talk about all the things that I want to talk about. And let's just start with the fact that this is one of the best movies about the movie business ever made. And it's kind of a great inside joke that in the movie, Dixon Steele's not following the book that he's been hired to adapt, but nor does the movie In a Lonely Place follow the book that it is based upon, the Dorothy B. Hughes novel In a Lonely Place. I have not read that book, but apparently screenwriter Andrew Solt and Nicholas Ray, when they got together and started working on the screenplay, they basically just kind of took the title and threw it over their shoulder and did what they felt like doing, so much so that Nicholas Ray even reshot the ending in an almost improvisational way. But Nicholas Ray came from the world of theater. Doing a little improv was totally in his wheelhouse. But there are just so many great lines in this movie about the people who make movies, as well as the people who consume movies, as well as the people who consume the books that those movies are based upon. And we got to start with the lovable Mildred Atkinson, because the entire movie centers around her, because she is the person who was strangled and thrown from a moving car. And the last thing she did prior to her murder was go over to Dixon Steele's apartment to recite to him or describe to him the book that she just read. He's too tired to read it. He's too uninterested to read it, even though he's going to be potentially hired to write it. But he basically hires her to come home and just tell him the story. And I love how she's unsophisticated, but incredibly enthusiastic. And I like how the movie's able to kind of poke fun at her, I guess, like her raw enthusiasm, but lack of sophistication, all at the same time, where she'll say things like, "Oh, I think it'll make a dreamy picture, Mr. Steele," is what I call an epic.
What do you call an epic?
Well, you know, a picture that's real long and has lots of things going on.
But her rabid, almost maniacal enthusiasm for this trashy novel is both admirable as well as kind of pitiful in a lot of ways. Because on one hand, Nicholas Ray is showing, like, these are the people who buy the books and see the movies that we are paid to create. So it's Nicholas Ray kind of poking fun at both the audience as well as the storytellers who are kind of catering to their taste. But I love how she'll say things like, "And you know, there are a lot of little plots and things I didn't even tell you about." And Bogey will just reply, "Thank you."
And there are lots of other little plots and things I didn't even mention.
Thank you.
His insolence and his dismissive attitude toward both the book as well as her taste, I feel like there's no better actor ever in history than Humphrey Bogart to play this kind of role, because he has one of the best I don't give a fuck personalities in the history of movies. But like with any great actor, every line reading is functioning on multiple levels. And just that first 5 or 10 minutes that she's in his apartment, and she's suspicious constantly that he's going to try to put the moves on her because he's getting into his bathrobe. This is a very sexual movie. There's no sex in it, but it's very overtly suggestive in a lot of ways when she's pretending to be shocked, but then later on, like, asking, like, "Well, are you going steady with anybody?" and so on and so forth. But I just feel like that first opening chunk where Mildred is telling the story and then ultimately getting murdered, it's like a brilliant little short film, and it brilliantly sets up the scenes that follow as Dixon Steele's awakened in the middle of the night by an old army buddy who's now a cop, who takes him downtown where he meets Captain Lochner, who not only asks him a few questions, but makes a few withering comments about the overall demeanor of Bogey, where once again we just get to see Bogey at his most petulant, because Lochner says, "You're told that the girl that you were with last night was found in Benedict Canyon, murdered, dumped from a moving car. What's your reaction? Shock? Horror? Sympathy? No. Just petulance of being questioned. A couple of feeble jokes."
You puzzle me, Mr. Steele.
Well, I grant you the jokes could have been better, but I don't see why the rest should worry you. That is, unless you plan to arrest me for lack of emotion.
And it's moments like that that perfectly capture the screen persona of Bogey and what turned him into an icon that has endured for all these many decades. But then the movie cranks things up even more because the lovely Gloria Graham comes in. And from that point on, the movie is just absolutely riveting, because Dixon Steele is smitten. He's rapidly falling in love. She's playing a little game of hard to get, because it's understandable. While she might like his face, he's also suspected of murder, but he is her neighbor, and slowly but surely he starts winning her over. And he has all these great lines, like when he's describing to her, "You know, when you first walked into the police station, I said to myself,
There she is, the one that's different. She's not coy or cute or corny. She's a good guy. I'm glad she's on my side."
And there's something about the way he says, "She's a good guy." It's almost like, I don't know, only Bogey can deliver lines like that, where I can't even explain why it makes me laugh so hard, but there's something about that intonation and that delivery style that just cracks me up, that he would choose to flirt with the girl by describing her that way. But the movie's divided up into this brilliant 3-act structure, where the first act is all about whether or not Dixon Steele's going to work on this crummy book adaptation and being suspected of murder. The middle act is falling in love with Gloria Graham, and these are some of the most loving scenes of Nicholas Ray's career, where we really get an inside look at what his private life might have looked like under good circumstances, like going to hear great music while smoking, lighting each other's cigarettes, and whispering all sorts of really sensual, erotic things into one another's ears. I mean, those scenes are absolutely incredible. And then the final act is the tragedy, where whether he's guilty or not, it doesn't even matter, because Dixon Steele is haunted by so many demons, and he's so prone to violence, and he's so aggressive and so psycho in so many ways, that there's no way that he's ever going to actually be able to have love, happiness, satisfaction, basically all the trappings of a normal life. He is doomed to live in a lonely place for the rest of his life. But those middle scenes where he and Gloria Graham are falling in love, I think those are the most romantic scenes of Humphrey Bogart's career, and he has plenty of healthy competition on that front, because you've got Casablanca and To Have and Have Not and The Big Sleep and all kinds of movies where he's involved in these really interesting love affairs. And the best part of this love affair is how artistically he starts to soar. Suddenly he's inspired, and he's writing all night, and he's writing some of the best stuff of his career, and he hasn't had this kind of focus since before the war, and she's typing up pages and handing him cups of coffee, but putting him to bed when he needs to go to bed. She kind of likes him when he gets all dopey and confused after these like 36-hour marathon writing sessions. It's just these scenes, it's like this is true bliss and happiness where you have both your love and your craft, and you're firing on all cylinders, and like the stars are aligned, whatever phrase you want to use. Of course, it's doomed not to last. But during these scenes, we get so many great scenes with Mel Lipman, the lovable agent, who's so excited to see Dix kicking butt again as a writer. And he's got so many great lines scattered throughout.
What does it matter what I think? I'm the guy that tried to talk Selznick out of doing Gone with the Wind.
Or the actor in this movie, who's one of Dixon Steele's old friends. He's an old actor from the silent era, but the character of Charlie Waterman. He's a terrible drunk, but once upon a time, he made the studios a lot of money. But now he basically drowns himself in cocktails while saying astonishing lines like when he shows up for the engagement party.
Mr. Waterman, you forgot to change your costume.
Well, this is not a costume, ignorant wench. It is the formal attire of a gentleman.
When I took my little brother to see In a Lonely Place and at the Film Forum, I remember he about fell out of his chair when he heard that line. But Dix's loyalty to his friend is so endearing. Where he keeps trying to tell other people, like, he's not radioactive, he's not poisonous, like his failure's not going to rub off on you. And he comes to his defense early on in the movie when the son-in-law of a studio head is talking a little trash to Waterman, and Dixon has to pop him one. But in the end, what makes this movie unforgettable is just the tragic love story and just seeing how sweet and sincere Dixon can be at times. Like, they're talking about what makes a good love scene in a screenplay, and she says, I love the love scene, it's very good, after reading the screenplay. And he says,
well, that's because they're not always telling each other how much in love they are. A good love scene should be about something else beside love. For instance, this one. Me fixing grapefruit, you sitting over there dopey, half asleep.
And I love how that scene's working for the story at the core of this movie, but it's also Nicholas Ray's commentary on what makes a good love scene in movies, period. This whole movie is like an essay by Nicholas Ray about the movie business, how to make a good movie, how to make a good love scene, while at the same time giving us this incredibly tragic story all at once. And that's what makes In a Lonely Place so endlessly rewatchable, is that it's functioning on so many different levels simultaneously and all in very satisfying fashion. And as we get into the final third of the movie, it's fascinating seeing how Dixon Steele reacts to his own reprehensible behavior. Like at one point, he nearly causes a car wreck, and he, after the fact, basically says, well, I've been in 100 situations like that, and usually I'm right. Like, oh God, like how many times have you nearly killed somebody with your car, threatened to bash in their head with a rock? He probably would have if it hadn't been for Gloria Graham to tell him to stop.
Stop, you kill him!
But he's acting totally morally justified after the fact. So we can totally get why Gloria Graham is kind of terrified of this guy. And in some of the best acting of Bogey's career toward the end of the movie, as he's starting to realize that his bride-to-be is most likely calling it off and trying to make plans to get away from him. See his hands shaking with rage, and once again the flame in his eyes, as we see it's some beautiful lighting as he's trying to light a cigarette, as he's trying to figure out like what he's going to do, and ultimately he ends up trying to choke her. I mean, he's in the middle of choking her to death when they get the call from the cops explaining that he is innocent and that they have found the true murderer and that they can get on with their lives and get married and be happy and so on and so forth. And it's just so heartbreaking and so tragic and so devastating as Gloria Graham's character Laurel explains to the cop,
Yesterday, this would have meant so much to us. Now it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all.
I mean, you want to talk about just like the ultimate downbeat, unhappy endings, while at the same time an ending that still makes your heart soar while you're wondering what does the future hold for these characters. I mean, for Dixon, this lonely place that the movie is describing is probably going to be his fate for the rest of his life. But for a few brief, shining weeks, he did manage to get very close to something resembling, being at peace and being in love and being happy.
I was born when she kissed me. I died when she left me. I lived a few weeks while she loved me.
And what makes that ending all the more remarkable is how Nicholas Ray basically bluffed his way through it because he was unsatisfied with the ending they had written. I just couldn't believe the ending that Bundy, screenwriter Andrew Solt, and I had written. I shot it because it was my obligation to do it. Then I kicked everybody off stage except Bogart, Art Smith, and Gloria. And we improvised the ending as it is now. In the original ending, we had ribbons, so it was all tied up in a very neat package, with Lovejoy coming in and arresting him as he was writing the last lines, having killed Gloria. I thought, shit, I can't do it. I just can't do it. Romances don't have to end that way. Marriages don't have to end that way. They don't have to end in violence. Let the audience make up its own mind what's going to happen to Bogey when he goes outside the apartment. And that is why Nicholas Ray is one of the all-time great directors. But I think I've managed to say most of what I want to say about In a Lonely Place. So just as a way of wrapping up this video, I'm going to offer some Humphrey Bogart recommendations for people who have not yet done the deep dive on his career. Once again, I got very lucky. My first summer in LA, summer 97, they were doing a Humphrey Bogart festival. And every Saturday morning at 10 a.m., I would watch a Humphrey Bogart movie at the Lamley Sunset 5. And it was really fucking cool. And a lot of these movies I'm going to recommend, I saw at that retrospective that lasted all summer. Some of these I discovered on my own later on. But for me, the essentials. These are not all the Bogey movies I've seen, but the essentials. The Roaring Twenties, great gangster movie with Bogey and James Cagney. High Sierra, same director, Raoul Walsh, but Bogey gets to take center stage. Maltese Falcon, John Huston's directorial debut, kick-ass film noir. Casablanca, if you have not seen it, shame on you. And if you have seen it, how come you haven't seen it 5-10 times? Casablanca, endlessly rewatchable. To have and have not, strong contender for my favorite Humphrey Bogart movie, but The Big Sleep's pretty goddamn good as well. Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yet another John Huston film and arguably Bogey's best performance, but I prefer In a Lonely Place. But Key Largo, if you want more John Huston and Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, check out Key Largo. In the 50s, I like this movie a little less. I enjoy the Cane Mutiny, and I enjoy Sabrina, I enjoy the Barefoot Contessa, and I enjoy The Harder They Fall. But it's really from like the Roaring Twenties through In a Lonely Place that's where we see most of the great Bogey performances in my book. And he's got some other movies like Dead End and things like that, but he is truly one of the greats. And whether he was working with Howard Hawks or Nicholas Ray or John Huston or Michael Curtiz or whomever or Raoul Walsh, he gave us so many legendary performances, one after another. And yeah, he had the good sense or the good luck to work with some of the best directors of that era repeatedly. But I hope you enjoyed this little 75th anniversary review. I've got a few more planned in the not so distant future. I've got a list of all the 1950 movies. And coming up, some contenders would be The Asphalt Jungle, maybe Night in the City, Winchester 73, The Furies. There's some good ones. And of course, Sunset Boulevard in August. But yeah, some good stuff right around the corner. So I will continue doing more 75th anniversary reviews in the future. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.